Alright, so I'm sure a lot of you on here who dive into the anime community know about My Hero Academia. You all know it is one of the most popular manga out there, as well as one of the most popular anime, with like 28, 29 actually coming out as of September of this year, and like 5 seasons worth and 2 movies for this series alone. It's huge. I gotta admit to you all, at one point I was not a fan of this series. I thought it was another cookie cutter shonen, all that stuff, until I actually saw a few episodes of season 2 back when it was still airing on Toonami. And ever since then, I've actually been a pretty big fan of this series. And I'm not crazy about it, but I definitely enjoy it. It's one of the few shonens I've actually gotten into. However, that is not what we're here to talk about today, folks. Today I want to talk about one of the many spin-offs within My Hero, and one that I've actually grown pretty fond of myself. This one currently has about 10 books to its name, with an 11th on the way this very year. Today, folks, I want to talk about the prequel spin-off manga of My Hero, known as My Hero Academia Vigilantes. And to be honest with you guys, I am very excited to talk about this with you all, because I feel like this manga does not get enough love. In my opinion, I would be highly excited if this ever got an anime adaptation, even if it was only like 12 to 13 episodes, like a season's worth. I'd be super stoked to see this actually get adapted into an anime. But for now, let's talk about it. So to start off with, Vigilantes is a story that turns around and tells, instead of the main story of hero students or even professional heroes, it talks about these 3 vigilantes right here: the Crawler, Popstep, and Knuckle Duster. And first of all, I love how Knuckle Duster is a very big Easter egg shout out to DC Comics' Batman, just by the looks of him, because for one, he has no powers, he relies on his own brute strength as well as whatever gadgets he can get on. But unlike Batman, Knuckle Duster is not afraid to use guns. So you could say he's like a rougher around the edges, kind of like Red Hood meets Batman and mix them together. The Crawler is also a really fun little character because he has a really unique quirk in the fact that he can stick himself to walls and floors and slide around on them. And honestly, I love the whole character development that all 3 of these guys get across the entire story. For one, the Crawler starts off as this kind of, how do I describe him? Kind of like a dunce in a way. He seems kind of passive to everything that goes on around him. But over the course of the story, you actually see how he evolves as a heroic figure. And I actually like that about him. He's kind of like a lot of people. The official authors of this manga actually said that the Crawler was meant to represent what the main character of My Hero, Izuku Midoriya, could have been if he had not met All Might that day. And to be honest with you, I can definitely see some of the resemblances here, like the same heroic spirit and all of that. But yeah. And now finally we get to Popstep. Popstep is another unique character because she originally isn't doing vigilante work, like heroic and all that stuff. She's mostly just doing illegal pop idol stuff on the streets. And I like how these 3 all come together in some random coincidence where the Crawler actually saves Popstep from a few muggers before Knuckle Duster arrives and just finishes off these muggers, and from there they all just team up to try to deal with one of the major problems that Vigilantes actually covers, which is them discovering the source of Trigger. And Trigger is kind of like a drug that is the equivalent of steroids in My Hero. Because a lot of these characters, they all have quirks, and Trigger acts as a kind of steroid for their powers, or just sends them out of control. But at the same time, it makes anyone who uses it go absolutely insane, crazy, just out of control berserkers. So these three are all tracking down any leads they can find on trigger distribution, as well as discovering any other villains that they come across. And what I really liked about the whole story in general, just around these three, was how it had a very episodic feel to it. Like, there's the whole overarching plot of them finding just the one who's distributing the trigger, the whole chain around it, finding out the villainous organization that's distributing it. But throughout it all, every single chapter throughout felt very episodic, just so you could like jump from one point to another without feeling too confused. And I actually really liked that. However, the story didn't just revolve around these three. No way. One of the biggest positives I could give to Vigilantes is that not only did it introduce us to more new characters, but it actually reintroduced us to a lot of older characters that we knew of from the main series itself. And a lot of different backstory was actually revealed for a lot of these different characters. For instance, main characters like Present Mike, Eraserhead, and even Stain, and hell, even Kurogiri actually got more build-up to their backstory. And I actually really like that. For instance, Stain was the biggest surprise. And for those of you who don't know, Stain was one of the big main villains. Like, he even had his own arc within the series itself. Way back in Season 2, I think. The first half of Season 2 was his arc. No, actually, the second half. I take that back. My apologies. But what was really cool is that we actually learned more about Stain's backstory in literally Book 2 of Vigilantes. We actually learned that at one point, Stain was actually a vigilante known as Stendhal. A kind of vigilante for hire who took out multiple villains the more permanent way. And I really like the way that Stain is represented here. When he's in his Stendhal outfit, he's kind of like a rogue samurai, wearing like a domino mask as seen here. And we see his transition from becoming a vigilante to a full-fledged hero-killing villain. And I actually really liked that. It explained a lot more about Stain, but not only him. We actually see major backstory given to Present Mike, Eraserhead, Kurogiri, and hell, even Midnight. We actually see them, I believe, in volume 6 to 7 of the manga. We actually see some of their backstory back when they used to be students at UA High School. We actually discover that Kurogiri was actually the reanimated corpse of a close friend to Aizawa and Present Mike. We come to find out that he was actually revealed in volume 26, I believe, of the main story My Hero manga, that their childhood friend was now the reanimated corpse of Kurogiri. And I actually really liked that. Not only that, but we also got to see a lot of other heroes make their debut as well. We got to see characters like Best Jeanist, Fat Gum, Midnight, Ingenium, and hell, even All Might. We actually get to see all of them get a chance to shine. And once again, I like that this gives us more filler to their characters and that they're not just one and done characters. It gives us more to them. And I really like that. It gives us more of a chance to explore the world of My Hero and more of the more adult characters here. Hell, we even get introduced to an original character to Vigilantes known as Captain Celebrity, a hero who actually comes from the United States of America in Vigilantes, but he's actually been transferred to Japan due to a lot of lawsuits due to his wily, womanizing ways, and you can definitely tell just by looking at the dude, who is pictured here on the far right, that he's a bit of a tool. I mean, come on, the frickin' supermodel hair, the damn chin. Literally, he just screams old American comics, and I absolutely find that hilarious. Hell, literally, that's more of what Vigilantes is it gives us more of that kind of superhero comic style, and yet it's not afraid to dive into some of the darker aspects of the story, like things such as, like I mentioned before, drug trafficking. But we also see things like underground fighting rings. We see like major villain organizations popping up. We see mass chaos. Hell, at one point, Vigilantes literally had one of its biggest moments, I believe, in I think volume 5 or 6. We actually see them having a major moment where there were a whole lot of lives on the line, and it was absolutely gripping to keep going with this story. So I do not regret diving into this for more of the older heroes, as well as all the new characters that were introduced. So another one of the things that I like about Vigilantes is that not only do the heroes, both old and new, get a chance to shine, but we also get to see a mix of old and new villains. For instance, we actually see a brand new villain featured in Vigilantes only, named Kuin Hachisuka, which is actually the form of a ginormous bee, as shown here on the left, which has a bloated abdomen that what it does is it sinks itself into a person's eyeball and possesses that individual, which you have to admit, that is absolutely horrifying. It controls them like a host body, as well as sprouts a massive hive of bees to use at their command. And Kuin Hachisuka definitely plays a pretty interesting role throughout the series at first, because not only do we see the first body being taken over, which is actually the daughter of Knuckle Duster, so that adds some real neat backstory to Knuckle Duster himself, but it also ends up possessing Pop Step, as shown here with Bee Pop. And just having that kind of a dangerous power just running around possessing people is a horrifying thought to me. But then we get to some other more intriguing villains, such as number 6. The number 6 is interesting because he works for the Villain Factory, the big bad in the Vigilantes' entire series. However, he also adds more to the story because he actually possesses Knuckle Duster's former power of super speed, or as he calls it, O'Clock. And the way that he's trying to imitate O'Clock, in fact trying to replace him, is an interesting motive. And honestly, it makes his character much more different than others. He tries to follow along with whom he considers his favorite hero, whilst on the path of trying to replace him. It's a fascinating look at a different villain's backstory, but not only that, we also get some other added filler backstory to some returning villains, such as All for One, who primarily appears throughout the first half of Season 3, as well as Rappa, a minor villain from Season 4 in the Overhaul arc, whom is actually shown during the Underground Fighting Ring arc, which actually starts in Volume 11, and I'm super excited to get into that one. So all in all, the villains themselves are very fascinating because you have unique new villains as well as returning old villains that are kind of sprinkled all the way throughout. I liked that. It made for a very interesting story because it's not just the League of Villains popping up again earlier. No. It gives a chance for other characters to make their moves and shine and show that there's not just the League of Villains sprouting around all over in My Hero. There's others before that, whilst also introducing older villains as well. And I actually really like that. It shows the rise of some and the fall of others, which really added more flavor to the story than I was ever expecting. So now, I've got to give credit where credit is due, and the guys who made Vigilantes really did a fantastic job of capturing the feel of the original manga, whilst also having their own unique little spin on it, because one of the biggest things that you always look at for My Hero, and even in Vigilantes, there are a lot of Easter eggs and homages to classic superhero comics, whether it's over-the-top action, like with these punching sequences as shown here on the bottom left, or just rapid fire energy attacks, or big intimidating villains, or even some creepy imagery. Hell, the biggest thing that I saw was that they actually had little Easter eggs, where they had two characters looking straight up like Cyclops and Wolverine from Marvel's X-Men, and even having O'Clock, back when he was a hero, looking like DC Comics' The Flash. And Knuckle Duster himself even looks like a mix of Red Hood and Batman. And that's one of the biggest things that I love about My Hero, is that it has a little homage to classic superhero comics while also putting their own better spin on it in some cases. I really like that, how they sprinkle all these little Easter eggs in. But anyways, there is a lot of action and a lot of comedic moments sprinkled all throughout Vigilantes, mostly because their chapters are very episodic in nature, and that I believe is one of its biggest strengths, because it has an overarching plot, but it feels more free to be able to tackle other things and kind of dip between light and dark themes throughout the series, with the occasional joke thrown in, which some cases make me chuckle, others just like, I see what you're doing there. But really, the imagery and art style definitely really helps out with Vigilantes, and I feel like that's one of its biggest strengths. So all in all, my overall score for Vigilantes, I would have to give it a solid 9 out of 10. My only complaint being that some of the comedic moments are kind of just out there, but all in all, I feel like Vigilantes is very strong on its own, with the fact that it brings in old and new characters, a really interesting, much more darker story, as well as really well done action scenes, with a way to kind of keep the audience hooked to know more, as it builds on more of the older characters and everything else. All in all, I feel like Vigilantes does not get the attention that it deserves, and I'm hoping this video will help intrigue some of you to check it out for yourself. Because if you know about My Hero, and you're currently caught up with the main English release of the manga, and you're waiting for a while, I'd recommend giving Vigilantes a pickup and giving it a try. Especially if you want to see more of the older heroes in action, as well as also have a bit of a darker story mixed in there. Anyways, thank you all for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off. Have a nice day.